My name is Rajiv Ranjan. I work with Paris 21. It is a consortium of national statistics offices and development agencies working towards building statistical capacity in NSOs in developing countries. We have been in this space for almost 20 years now. We have worked with many national statistics offices to understand their practices of data dissemination and also the challenges they face. 2016, we did a discussion paper where we discussed about the challenges faced by typical national statistics offices in developing countries in terms of different technological hurdles or capacity issues that they face. Today we are going to talk about something that we packaged as a data flow assessment framework. This is a product of experiences in countries where we have worked, including the attempts by OECD and the partners UNICEF, UNSD to deploy the .stat solution in countries like Tunisia and in Cambodia. I'll stop here, and before I go into the slides to kind of give an overview and set the scene for the discussion, I'll ask my panel members to introduce themselves one by one. I'll start with Fadila.
So Fadila Najah from INS Tunisia.
Yves Jacques, Data and Analytics Section, UNICEF.
Trevor Fletcher, independent consultant, formerly OECD.
Thank you for being on the panel. Just to set the scene, what we do know about data dissemination in national statistics offices, typically in countries where we work, countries with possibly a low to medium capacity. And the dissemination typically looks like this. You have dissemination reports printed as paper. Then someone selects some of the tables depending on what are the priority data needs. They type those tables into a database and they appear on a website. So this is how typically the digital platforms currently looks like in many NSOs. The main characteristic of this flow is the manual data entry. Now this creates many problems. I mean, I don't know how many of you are kind of familiar with this process, but this is a very specific case in countries specifically in Asia and Africa where dissemination portals are manually maintained, and there are more than one in many cases. So you can imagine how the labor multiplies. Because of the manual data entry, there are some problems. First of all, the printed publications themselves are very late. If census has happened in 2012, the reports might come in 2015 or maybe 20 in some cases. So there is always delayed data on online platform. Also, on the online platform, there are less data than what is produced, because not all data can be keyed in time by people doing the data entry. And because it is a manual data entry, we have error prone data also. Now what is the solution that we can think of which can solve this problem? The solution could be a solution that can tap the data when it is available for the first time in the digital format, so that instead of taking the data from a print publication, the solution, the dissemination solution, takes the data from the point when the data is available for the first time in digital format. In different countries, that point for different data sets may be different. And then there are some issues, because in some countries you would see that data is organized by source. So for example, data for census is kept in someone else's computer, data for a household survey on health and demography is kept in someone else's computer. So the processes are different, the practices are different. In some cases there are some sort of modeling happening, in some cases there is no modeling at all. In some cases there is a huge capacity. Yesterday we heard about INEGI. They have done quite a lot of work in terms of streamlining the backend process. In Tunisia we have seen quite a lot of work, but at the same time we also have the issues of infrastructure in many countries. So all these variable factors like the processes, practices, capacity and infrastructure creates different situations for different countries to cope up with this challenge. And simple fact is the solutions which do not take into account the local context, they are not delivering. I mean, the first thing is that the IT system must lower the burden not only on reporting but also on dissemination, but that is not happening. I mean, use of IT systems have not been in a position where you can say that they have successful in reducing the burden, the workload on NSO part to reduce the effort required to put all the data, more data, error-free data onto the online platforms. So today if you look for reliable data and exhaustive data from a country in Africa, possibly you would not go to the online data dissemination platform that they may be maintaining, but you will go to their PDF versions of the reports that they may have uploaded on their websites. So what is data flow assessment framework? There are two things in this framework. One is that it has a set of steps for assessing the process, practice, capacity and infrastructure to understand the current state of affairs, like as is processes in countries, how the data flows from after processing to dissemination. Do they keep the data organized by sectors or topics, or are they organized by sources such as census data, agriculture data, or let us say demographic and health survey data, which are done using mixed surveys or DHS surveys. The second point is that the data flow assessment framework also recommends the 2B situation, how the process flow should be done for maximum impact, lowering the burden, maximizing the data which is going out, minimizing the time that it takes to go to put it online, and minimizing the errors. Apart from these steps to arrive at these 2 points, the framework also recommends that after the assessment, these are the assessment guidelines. After the assessments, you should have some sort of report to convey what you have found after doing the assessment, based on which the solutions like .stat suite can be customized for specific data, specific needs. So also it includes a project plan, a template for project plan, so that after the assessment, what are the required factors which needs to be in place, what are the risks which are there in such deployments. The project plan also plays a role in terms of bringing everyone in the National Statistics Office at the same page in order to have a similar kind of expectation from the project rollout. So it is very important that we have these two things as part of an output by after conducting the assessment. So in nutshell, and this is my last slide, what we do when we say that we need to assess the data flows. The first step is assessment of indicators, availability and their organization. How many SDG indicators are we talking about in Cambodia, let us say. For example, if we have to put the indicators data out on SDG platform or in data dissemination platform. How many indicators data are we talking about, let us say compared to the National Development Plan, not only SDG. So that is the amount of data that we are talking about. That should be the data that should go out at least. How are they organized? Are they organized by topic? Are they organized by sources? How are they organized? Then what is the process? I mean, is there a release committee which releases all data for dissemination? Or is it different departments who are independently releasing their own data onto the online platform? Does it go through the publication process that I showed earlier and then goes into the digital platform, or does it go to digital platform from somewhere else altogether? And then the current dissemination practices, the infrastructure, the roadblocks, the capacity constraints, the needs in terms of machines. So all that needs to be also assessed. And the second last thing is the presence and need of data modeling practice. I mean, we have learned a lot about data modeling from the point of, I mean, dissemination from international agencies or custodian agencies in case of SDGs to UNSD, for example. I mean, that's a very advanced use case where WHO or UNICEF uses the SDG DSD to send data to UNSD. But in case of a country, when they try to maintain a unified data warehouse at the back end, how many DSDs are we talking about? Does the data in the back end go through some sort of modeling or not? Those are the practices which needs to be assessed in the fourth stage. And then finally, the IT infrastructure, including the database requirements. I mean, in most cases, I have seen that directly from the publication, data goes into the dissemination platforms. And there is no unified one database where you can see all the data coming from different sources in one place, probably in different formats according to the topic. That is not the reality. So all these things are followed to understand the as-is situation, and then there is a recommendation guidelines about what can be done in order to make the process more efficient, and which results into more data for consumption in a public dissemination platform. So that's the outline. This is a data flow assessment that we all worked together on and tried to kind of package it in such a way that it is reusable. It's not only for .stat suite, but for any solution which needs to be deployed in a country, but the primary fact is that we need to understand the processes there and then contextualize the solution. I mean, yesterday we had a long discussion about trying to understand what are the features which would make the DLM more effective. Probably this is the discussion which needs to take place before the DLM functionalities are articulated. Probably here some challenges and opportunities may emerge in order to DLM to have those functionality to satisfy those needs. I'll stop here now, and I'll turn back to my panel members, which is really a good representation of the issues that we have faced, and then we can hear from them about their experiences and the way they are dealing with the current situation. So Fadila is from Tunisia. This is the first country where .stat suite was deployed. Before that, they had a different process. And so my question to you, Fadila, is that how do you see solutions coming to countries which are mostly led by development partners? And do you see any opportunities to customize the solutions that you receive? And if not, then how you have tried to adjust to that kind of constraint in order to meet your own needs?
Okay, thank you, Rajiv, for the opportunity. So I think that the deployment of .stat was an opportunity for the INS. Otherwise, we did not yet get engaged in this process. But for INS Tunisia now, I think that as we are in a transition process, we have already two parallel processes, because we are still disseminating our data in our current platform, which is the data portal, because the data portal now is the main database which feed our web interfaces, and we are preparing the .stat to be launched very, very soon. So let's say that the process for the moment is a bit complicated compared to which what it should be in the current way. How it can be personalized, I think that we are already discussing with the OECD team how really to include the essential functionality really to respond to INS need, because regarding our experience going from dissemination step that was really very complicated and also very manual in each step, and also now in addition to all the modelization work that we are doing in SDMX work, so we are trying just to imagine a global process that can include at least working on data from the beginning of the dissemination process. So starting from the data received in the dissemination department. We cannot, as we were discussing yesterday, we cannot really include in the .stat platform, for example, work on the process files. So it cannot, for example, impact the product process, for example, and asking producer to input their microdata on the platform. And I'm not really seeing that this feature is already coming in the near future on the platform. But at least by having a space that can resolve the problem, for example, of INS, because now all the file we are receiving are received by email. Mm-hmm. And there is no central point to centralize this file. So, for example, the collect space that we were discussing yesterday can resolve the problem. So at least we have centralized point where all the received file can be centralized and treated in one space. And after that, it came the format of file received and how we will process or how we will work on this on this file. Here we can start speaking about the involvement of producer in this process. So if we as dissemination team will just be the main person in charge of working on this platform, I don't think that really we will resolve the problem, because after that producer will just keep sending as files in XML file or in CSV file in the very better case, but also in PDF file, and external sources which present 70% of the data disseminated by INS will keep sending their file in PDF and in Word also, but and sometimes on some sheet paper. So the solution is how to integrate this producer, this person in the process, how to offer them an integrated space in which they can really manage their data, their final data, at least their microdata, how this system can be simple as much as possible, to encourage them really to move from their usual environment and to go working on the .stat platform. Other point which is really very important is building capacity of these people to be able to work on the system, because as we are now adopting the new standard of SDMX and trying to move all our data in this format, it's really not evident to ask people to come and work in this standard, especially that in Tunisia really the teamwork is very reduced, and there is people who want to join, but the problem is that the team already working on the SDMX modelization is really focused on working on data, and they don't really have time to go and make building capacities for external sources and also for producer. There is also the problem of availability of these people, and which opened the door to be sufficiently involved or not in this process. So I think that really, if we will be able to manage these 3 points, is to have integrated system, simple system, and to be able to encourage enough these people to join us on working by working on the system and to build their capacity to be able to work on the system. Maybe we can have a better solution.
Thank you. That's interesting, and you articulated it very well, that you need capacity development and modular solution, a very flexible solution to make this happen. So Yves, coming to you. UNICEF has worked with DevInfo for a very long time. And because of various reasons, I mean, that was the default data dissemination platform for many countries, at least in Africa and in Asia. One of the things that have been kind of said that most of the time what we see in dissemination space is just 10 to 15% of data that has been collected by NSO. Do you think that the design of the software has a role to play in either increasing or decreasing the output that is out there in the dissemination space? And if so, what changes do you see from DevInfo going forward to .stat suite?
Okay, thanks, Rajiv. Great set of questions. Right, Rajiv said, okay, Eve, you're UNICEF. That makes you the DevInfo guy. So I'll do my best. And we did actually close down DevInfo at the end of 2018, and that was a kind of big moment for us since we'd supported it for many years. And I think for a lot of countries, it was the first opportunity to actually publish their data digitally on the web. And so real groundbreaking product, and closing it down was not an easy thing to do. And yet, over the years, I think it had gathered quite a few issues, and the technology was pretty stale, and the standard support was not very good. And that's what I'd like to make a real distinction here, is the distinction between IT and IM, right? Information technology versus information management. And this is where it comes down to platforms and tools on one side, but on the other side, how we manage information, how we manage data, and how standards play into that. And I think that's where DevInfo maybe fell down. So I think on the platform side, on the technology side, it really offered a lot to countries and gave them this tool, this great tool that they could get their data out there on the web. At the same time, standard support was really poor. And what we got over the years was a lot of duplicate data, a lot of conflicting data. So a lot of the quality attributes that you would like to see in your data were hard to achieve with DevInfo. Things like comparability or versionability, things that we would expect to be able to have, we couldn't have. And so that's really on the information management side. So I think going forwards, well, when UNICEF was looking at where we were trying to go and why did we join the SIS-CC community, and it was really because it's a standards first community. And this is something that I always tell people when I talk about the community, that first thing to think about is SDMX. And why do we like SDMX? Well, it's, for me, from a UN perspective, it's the preferred standard for statistical data and metadata exchange. But there's a reason for that, because it enforces a lot of validation. It helps you to make sure that your structures, your code lists, and so on are normalized and easy to share. Makes it that your data has a lot of the quality attributes that you'd like your data to have, as I said before. So it's versionable and comparable, and you can validate it and so on. And the standard is only going further in that direction with movements such as VTL, which are going to even enhance the validation possibilities of the standard. And so my feeling is that when you get your standards set and you start to train people in that direction, then the tools kind of start to follow. And the challenges that we see at UNICEF around the data that we get are the same challenges that NSOs have, in that you get data from all kinds of line ministries, for example, over which you have very little control. And as you were saying, maybe they give you an Excel, a CSV. That's if you're lucky, it's structured. Otherwise, it could be a PDF. It could even be a PDF that's actually from a Xerox machine that's OCR and really, really hard to get the data out of. So we get the same kind of things at UNICEF. We get all kinds of formats in which we spend so much time trying to harmonize and integrate raw data, a lot of micro data coming from so many different sources. And so again, my feeling there is the more that we focus on standards, the more that if we have, for example, line ministries and so on, as well as NSOs saying, yes, let's use SDMX, let's try and structure our data using SDMX, then honestly, whether you're using one tool or another becomes a lot less important. So, while I think the SIS-CC community has got some great tools, to me, the thing that's more important is actually the standards and the use of SDMX, the idea of GSBPM as a kind of foundational way to organize your business processes and to think about the work that you're doing. And so that's really, yeah, between IT and IM, where did DevInfo do great, where did it not? And the last point I want to make is I think we also discovered with DevInfo that because it's viewed as a technology problem, so then that makes data a technology problem and not an information management problem. What we found in most countries is there was the DevInfo guy. And so if you're a statistician or a sector specialist, you have your spreadsheets and you kind of throw them over the wall, and you expect the DevInfo guy to get it in there and eventually it'll appear on the web. So what we're trying to do is turn that on its head and say, actually, it's not a technology problem. It's an information management problem. As much as we can, I think the community should, is going in the direction of making the tools easier to deploy, easier to manage. I think we want to abstract away the IT problem as much as we can and make it so that it's really an information and data management kind of problem. And so that when we train people up, we're not training a bunch of IT people how to run an IT system. We're training demographers and statisticians, information managers, how to organize, structure, model data, and using the SDMX format, and then putting it into the system. And then what that does is widen the base of people that have the necessary knowledge, because again, we found in so many countries we had one point of failure being the DevInfo guy. And we would really like to get away from that, where instead what we have are 10, 15, 20, 30 sector specialists that know SDMX. They know their data and they know how to structure it and they know how to upload it into the system, and then you get a lot of institutional memory and capacity that way, and many points of failure instead of just one.
That's a very important point, Yves. I mean, and thanks for highlighting that. It's true. I mean, if you look at how the dissemination landscape has changed. So till the time it was paper publication, there was a publication specialist or statistical publication guy in NSOs who would take care of that publication. As soon as the platform started appearing, since they were IT tools, the tools went to the IT department. People who were doing networks, people who were doing Active Directories, they started doing DevInfo and other dissemination tools. And the subject matter specialists were left behind only to give you data in Excel or at best in CSV. So the thing is, it's a really important point to think about, that how do we bring back the statistician, the subject matter specialist back into the picture, and not treat it as a IT problem. I mean, it's an information management problem. And information management is pretty distributed, and different challenges are there in different situations, and that's important to capture. That's very important. Thank you for that. Trevor, you have been in Cambodia for last how many years? 3 months? Okay. Trevor has been with, was with OECD. Now he is working as an independent consultant. He was in Cambodia for some time, and he studied how the data flows in Cambodia. And there are two sides of it. One is internal data, and the second is external data. Internal data is the data that National Statistics Office collects all by itself. For example, mix survey, they do it probably with the help of Ministry of Health, but the data collection, the sample frame, everything is decided at the NSO. But then there are other set of data, and we have more colleagues from here from Cambodia, they can vouch for it. There are other set of data which comes from the line ministries such as Ministry of Education. And I have seen it personally how the NSO receives those data, as in a PDF. So what challenges you spotted in a typical NSO like in Cambodia, and also from your past experiences, that needs to be resolved by the approach that it is not an IT problem but an information management problem? What are the main challenges you found, and according to you, what approaches should be taken to resolve them?
Okay, thanks, Rajiv. Good question. Okay, so regarding the data flow analysis, when I went to Cambodia, I was very optimistic, and I took your framework with me, and I thought, right, I'll go and visit all the 27 different line ministries, go through the framework, and come back with a fully comprehensive document listing all the data flows. Proved to be not quite that simple. The sort of difficulties of actually getting to meet the right people were quite extreme, partly because of the role of the NIS within the national fiscal system. I mean, they're a part of the Ministry of Planning, they're not separate. They don't have quite the sort of muscle to sort of make these kind of meetings happen. So in the end, out of the 27 line ministries, I got to meet 6.
Okay.
And sometimes not with perhaps the people who knew everything that I needed to know, but I was able to document 30 or more, 31 or 32 different data flows, and some of these are very sort of weird and wonderful flows with data, as you've sort of said earlier, arriving to the NSO sometime after, weeks or months after they were originally compiled, and in a PDF format. So someone might have to spend a week typing them in, making errors, all sorts of possibilities. So just looking at these, perhaps just a tip of the iceberg, you can see there's huge potential for, improving the information management here by providing access to the CAMSTAT system, pure and simple. I mean, using the kind of techniques we've seen here of just mapping existing data sets and uploading it into the CAMSTAT system, you'd have better quality data, way more timely, etc. Fairly easy stuff to identify. But the challenge, well, there's 2 big challenges. One is the capacity. It would take a lot of training of the line ministry staff. We also undertook a sort of small capacity survey, and some of the ministries were strong, as you'd expect. Others practically zero capacity, so that has to be addressed. And also, I think just the policy of sharing data. The ministries sort of send it when they want and in the format that they want, and this needs to be addressed. So, again, part of what I did was to draft a data sharing agreement, a memorandum of understanding to say that the situation should be the moment that the data is available in an electronic format, it should be transmitted to the NSO, even if it's not published yet. You could say it's in conditional, but it should go to the NSO, and preferably, in an SDMX format, but primarily electronic, not PDF sort of 6 months later. And this would be a huge gain already. Then the longer term aim of actually rolling out, CAMSTAT, so into the line ministries themselves. And the same applies to within the NIS in the different sectors, where you'd have the same kind of more timely transmission of data using the standard. So that's the challenge, and the solutions are having a good data sharing agreement, which is actually not just a piece of paper, it's adopted, which will need sort of higher political support from minister level, I would think, to make that happen. And I think this applies, not just to Cambodia, but to many countries. And I think this whole exercise in the sort of replacing of DevInfo with the .stat is a really important sort of template. If we can get this to work, I mean, was it 120 countries have DevInfo? Or they're going to need to be replaced with something?
It's hard to say how many active instances there still are, but I can say that I get an email probably every day asking me something about DevInfo. So.
Well, you are the DevInfo guy, so.
Yeah, so I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, I think we all are talking about here the issues that current dissemination space is marred with, which is that there is a lot of ad hoc processes in place. Most of them are manual. There is a huge demand for capacity, and the solution architecture which was available in the past was not something which could have satisfied these needs. With a modular architecture like .stat suite, possibly we have a sense of some solution which can meet these requirements, which can meet the requirements of information management, the data management aspect, not only the dissemination side. I mean, if you look at what we have done in Cambodia, we have just replaced the container. DevInfo, the data which was there in DevInfo has gone from DevInfo to .stat suite with better formatting, using encapsulated SDMX and good data modeling. What lies before DevInfo is still unattended, and that is where the challenge is, because unless we meet the gaps in that space, we would not get timely data, we will not get more data, because of course, because every data that goes out in the dissemination platform needs to be manually entered. So there is always a risk of not doing the exhaustive data sets in the dissemination platform, and of course there are erroneous data. So I think we need to be careful about what we are trying to solve, and this comes from a proper assessment of the challenges that the national statistics officers face. Not to, I mean, many of them are managing more than one data dissemination platform, not least because they are different data types such as geospatial data, aggregated data, and microdata. But even in one particular set, I mean, even if we talk about aggregated data, typically in each national statistics office in Africa, at least you have 2 data platforms, right? So maintaining them manually requires double the work. Okay, so I guess we will stop here for our discussion. If you have any questions to the panel members, yes, please. How are we doing with the time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, so question regarding what I believe is bottleneck that all of you mentioned, which is data entry. Did any one of you considered using crowdsourcing services, such as Amazon Mechanical Turk or anything like that?
That's an interesting question. I actually have an RFP published right now to look for people who can help us actually identify some of the information in raw data sets where they might be even in languages we don't speak and so on. And we're completely agnostic as to approach. AI, crowdsourcing, machine learning, brute force, whatever works. But so we're exploring it.
Mm.
Yes, just to, in this context, to provide my experience with some developers countries. One was Tunisia.
Mm.
We ran a 2-year cooperation project, and there I learned a lot of things. First of all, that developer countries needs very easy software, easy to install, easy to use, and they solve very small issues. As you said, it is true. Very often the data source where to start from are Excel files, because they prepare Excel files for the paper publication.
Yes.
And in this context, on the suggestion of Tunisia, and then we tested with them a lot, we created this tool called Excel to CSV to facilitate to move their CSV file that anyway they have somewhere. You have to find, but they have, because they prepare paper publication. But then they have to must able to use easily, because they don't need the assistance by IT. In general, in developing countries, you have an IT department composed by 5, 6 people.
Yeah.
Not more. This happens in all the Balkanic countries, for example.
Yeah.
Where there are countries with candidate countries for the Union European, that you have an IT department for people, and very likely just 1 or 2 are skilled enough to support the things. So it is very, very important to have easy things. Regarding, I think that I am not quite sure, but I think that the success, in some sense, of DevInfo was also related to the installation. If I don't, if I'm not wrong, DevInfo has a backend access database. Is correct?
Yeah.
The original one access, but later on they supported SQL Server.
Also, in the sense that it was very easy to install anyway. Logically, the technology advanced, so it is. But also in this context, you have to provide. And another thing, very, very important, the capacity building actions. We provided to the just on SDMX to Tunisia maybe 4 or 5 sessions, and maybe now after 4 or 5 they are able to. Well, Tunisia was a very good
NSO.
in the sense that after some session they were already skilled to operate autonomously in SDMX. There are worse situation. I mean, Tunisia was, I think, the best situation that I found in this sense. So the capacity building action is very, very important. And capacity building action with an approach step by step, in order and leave them the suitable documentation with a step-by-step approach and the example, so they can repeat, and with the follow-up where you put on the table some homeworks that they have to do, and when you go back they present the result of these homeworks.
No, thank you. Yeah, I think you agree that, I mean, it was an important thing to do, right? I mean, at the National Statistics Office, this must have been a new process when this came, because this, I mean, why would you need SDMX in the first place must have been the question, right? It's so complicated. How did you handle that?
In fact, I want us to go back to this building capacity point, because we are just encountering a situation, because when you are just working with someone who don't have any idea about SDMX, he's just thinking that you are pleased just to complicate his life. So why I don't give you the file and you do whatever you want with.
Yeah.
You just ask him that, or you're just trying to make clear that this file cannot be exploited, or it did not contain the required elements, etc. So this point of building capacity, making people really having the required knowledge to be able, at least not to be involved fully in the process, but to be able to understand what are you doing in this new platform. This is the first point. The second point, why we did engage it in SDMX, because we were aware from the beginning that the process will not be really easy in the beginning, that there will be a lot of complicated issues to be handled, especially with the external sources, because in the internal sources it's more easier to have an overview about the data and to have data available, but it's not at all the case with external sources, but regarding our strategy, because now we are planning to, in 5 years, to have more capacity to manage our data process in a better way. So in two levels: quality level first, and in a second level in a management level, and also in the data availability level.
Okay, great. Yeah, question?
Okay. I'm involved in data collection in Africa with the member states, the 50 plus member states. Can you go back to that slide? I believe that this does not depict the right scenario in Africa. Like paper comes maybe like less than 10% of the time. Like when I deal with data collection in Africa. What we do is we send out Excel questionnaire, and they give us, and they ask us to go to the websites, or in some cases they have also online databases. So this statement in many NSOs, you know, if it is Africa, I think that's not really. Now, if you go to the websites, many of African countries publish data online. It may be on PDF in some cases. They have their own reasons, strong reason to do that, you know, because it has narratives, charts, images, and all that. But if it is NSO, you know, if it's a typical NSO using DevInfo, it means that the departments in the NSO are the one providing the data. You know, it's not like an external body. You know, many of the data NSO is being centralized scenario, or a coordinator of the national statistical system. So this typical example does not really, you know, like if it is like population data, you know, you go to the population department, ask, you know, the Excel file or Stata, you know, what have you. So this, you know, the very, you know, this premise of this is not really depicting the right scenario in Africa. So I think, and you know, these days we are talking about Africa, AI, machine learning, you know, there are, you know, if like you're also talking about, they use multiple platforms. That's very true. Not only two, you know, in some cases it could be 5 or 6 and more than that. Like FAO goes with in its own platform, DevInfo, the ECA, the African Development Bank, and also they might have also their own legacy statistical system in Access or Excel. So they could be managing a number of platforms. So I think with a little effort, it's possible if there is a SQL Server database, there is an Oracle or Excel. Now it's very easy to really write something to extract and transfer. I think so to talk in very practical terms. I think we need to really to also see what is possible, rather than having this scenario. Thank you.
No, that's fine. I mean, I think, okay, maybe I'll respond after Abdullah says.
Yeah. Okay, I'll try to be brief. Mola, actually, when you say that this is not a typical scenario, we have seen that all over the place. And the thing is that maybe you receive, or UNSD receives data, not in PDF, but in Excel. But in order to get there, during the chain of production, it very often goes from digital to paper, then from paper back to digital.
Yeah.
So for example, they can send you a DevInfo database, but to populate that DevInfo database, they will take a survey report and type that data in. Been there, done that, seen that, Cambodia, Rwanda, other countries, right? So so then in the end it's digital, but in the process it can easily go from digital to paper and then back again. And actually I have a related comment on what Rajiv said, that when DevInfo was being introduced, the statisticians were left behind. It was given to IT, to IT professionals, those running the network and networking and email systems. And so the point that Rajiv made was bring back the statisticians. From what I've seen, you cannot bring back the statisticians. You can only bring them forward because they were never there in the first place. The issue is, why did IT people get involved is they had some data modeling skills to begin with. From our experience, in many cases, the statisticians, they can be very good at running surveys, they can be very good at survey data processing, but when it comes to the actual data modeling with aggregated data, it's just not there. So this capacity, SDMX is there very useful, not just because it's there as a data transmission standard, but because it gives you a framework to provide capacity building on data modeling, to introduce the very first things like dimensions, attributes. People who run surveys, they're not well versed in that. And yes, in that sense, I totally agree with Rajiv's point. You need to introduce higher abstraction. You need to get away from the whole IT paradigm. You need to provide data modeling to statisticians, and then instead of a software development exercise, you make it more into an analytical and data processing exercise. And that is crucial to sustainability going forward, and that is where the things are going in any case. But we have to get there, and there has to be a training of statisticians, not just in specific systems, but in the data modeling fundamentals in the first place.
Thank you. Maybe.
I just want to respond to Abdullah. Okay. You know, let's give you a typical example, like a population census report, okay? And it is a department next door which is producing that. So if I decide to, get the data from the paper, it's my decision. But if I investigate more, go talk to the person, I can be able to get the electronic data. So, the fact that that person, particular person, tends to copy from the paper doesn't mean that the electronic data does not exist.
No, that's
so,
that's
a little
point.
bit of effort would solve,
sure.
all these issues. That's what we should do. Like, if I would like, on paper, what they say is 1.4 million population. How do you allow that person, to put 1.4 and 1, 4, and 5 zeros? That does not really give you the right population figure, You should be able to get the digits. On paper, PDF, you don't have the precision, the decimal. In many cases, they are truncated. So in our case, we don't allow. But with a little bit of effort, you should be able to get the electronic data. So that's why I'm saying, it's not that the electronic data does not exist. Giving example that, that person doing from paper is not really the typical scenario that.
No, I mean, Mola, I thank you. I think we have moved in many countries from this state to better state. But nevertheless, we still have a long way to go. You are right saying that the digital data exists somewhere. There has to be an effort made by and facilitated by the system to get the data in the digital format when it is generated for the first time itself. So that's a valid point. Yes. So 30 seconds. Okay.
I want to confirm what he was saying, but at the same time, state that unfortunately this is the model that many times happens if you don't have enough commitment from the upper management of the NSO, of the government. Because our experience from the international organization, when you send a questionnaire, what will happen is exactly that. Somebody will sit, the newest employee of the NSO that was hired last week, will give them a report, and please copy that to the ILO. And this is the result that afterward you have a lot of for and back because of course the quality of this report is very bad. And this is a lost solution situation because it demands time and effort, and at the end you will be involving the people that really knows in the NSO. So I agree with him. The data is digital, is there, but if you don't have enough commitment and you don't manage to involve the upper management in order to make it real critical project, this is what happens.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we will go through the panel. 2 seconds. He took 3 seconds, and then 2 seconds each, and
2 seconds
each, and
Bye.
and close the session. Please go ahead. No, no.
Okay. Just a last point about the Edgardo point, and it's not about commitment; it's about agreement also between partners in the statistical system. Because, for example, in ANS, yes, data in electronic format exists, but what will make your partner obliged to send you the electronic format? We are asking since years. For example, the Education Ministry, which send us each year their yearbook in PDF, and we are obliged to fill manually their data to send us their data in Excel. But there is other issue behind that push them to do not say and send data. Is the quality of data, is the format of their file, etc. Because their process of data production, they don't have specialized people to produce data, which make a lot of error in their data, etc. All this problem in partner push them just to protect their data and to send you the minimum required of data just to be disseminated in this year. So there is really a lot of problem to be carried out in the whole process. It's not about really sending the data format in electronic format or in a paper format, but what is behind, what is the real reason that push your partner to do not send you the data in electronic format. And after that, it comes also the law, for example, that can give you as a NSO, for example, the authority in your other statistical partner in the statistical system to oblige them to send you data in this format or not, and to respect dates, etc.
Thank you. Yves, a way forward.
Okay, just adding quickly on to my colleague's point here. I think the other thing that's often missing or that gives problems in reporting is really around credit and citations, and people feel that when they give their data off, then no one's going to know that they're the ones that actually labored initially to create it. And I think that's a situation where, again, it comes down to relationships between NSOs and line ministries, and really learning to respect each other and being very clear about authorship and credits and citations. Just that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'd like to echo what Edgardo said. When you said that's the problem, and you were pointing at me, I wasn't sure if it was me or the screen, that you do need high level, you need a senior management support to make this happen. And I was thinking, how can that happen? But that has to happen through demand for the data. Mm-hmm. They have to realize that they need this data, and you think that something like the SDGs would be a kind of key thing to create that demand. But without that, nothing will happen. If you try and start at the middle, it just sort of withers on the vine.
Thank you. Thank you so much, the panel members. Please join me in thanking the panel members here. And with this, we close the panel. Thank you very much.